Hi, everyone. This is the After Dinner Show with me, Jeremy Nicholas. My guests today are Mel Sherwood and Caspar Craven. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Mel, you're in Edinburgh, I believe.
I am, yes.
And Caspar, where are you?
I'm in Weybridge.
Hi, everyone. This is the After Dinner Show with me, Jeremy Nicholas. Every week that pops up, that little thing, which is the YouTube thing flying by. Sorry, where are you? In Weybridge?
Weybridge, just down the road from you.
Oh, that's not very far away, is it?
No.
Right, okay. And I've got my usual whiskey that I have whenever we have a Scottish guest on. You're Australian, but you live in Edinburgh. And to be honest, I have it everywhere. Has anyone else got a drink with them?
I've got a glass of water.
Oh, perfect. Okay, now, so Mel is an expert on pitch and presentation for business, and Caspar is a round-the-world sailor and isolation expert. So let's go to him first because he's the expert on isolation. So you sailed around the world, Caspar, with your family as the crew. So you're used to being isolated in a very small space with your family.
That's right. Well, actually, I've had 3 years of my life at sea in basically self-isolation. Although I have to say, that was my choice, and this is a little bit different now. This feels like a doddle by comparison because when we were at sea, we had people being seasick, and the boat was moving the whole time, and people chucking buckets of water over us. This time around, we've got Netflix, we've got YouTube, and we can go outside for a walk and get away from each other. So actually, it feels like a bit of a walk in the park by comparison. So
your family were very young, weren't they, when you decided to sail around the world?
They were, 9, 7, and 2. So we had a good bit of homeschooling to do whilst working and sailing at the same time. So so a little bit of experience of this.
Yeah, and how on earth did you persuade your wife to let you do that with such small children?
So it was actually her idea. Nobody ever believes me when I say that. But it was Nicola who said, why don't we go and do something for a year? And her initial idea was say, let's go and sail around the Mediterranean. And I said, well, there's this little sort of race which goes across the Atlantic. And she said, well, that sounds fun. There's other boats doing that. And then I said, well, wait, when we get to the other side, then we can keep going. And she's like, oh, all right then. But actually, it was her idea to start with. And I just kind of built on it. And because she was seasick the whole way around the world as well, actually. So she never really got over her seasickness. But yeah, it was her idea.
So have you got any tips for people that have small children in the house on how to keep them occupied?
Oh yeah, lots. The have a routine. Get them involved in doing different things. My experience with kids, if they don't feel involved and engaged, they very quickly become terrorists. Build in plenty of playtime. So we're having a lot of fun at the moment. So I asked the kids 2 nights ago, what's a family activity that we can do? And everyone came up with a suggestion and we voted on it. And basically we've got the Craven cook-off going off this week. So every night someone different has to cook a meal. And so mine was actually tonight. So I did chicken sweet and sour. So first time I've done that, and the scoring is going to come in later as to how I've done. So having a bit of fun, getting them involved and everything. So,
Mel, how are you eating during this? Because I'm just wondering, are people going to come out of this fatter or thinner? Because I think we're not doing very much, are we? We're stuck in the house. I know you go running around Arthur's Seat, don't you?
Yeah, I wouldn't say running, but yes, I do wander around. Yeah. I occasionally run. Most times I walk.
Yeah. So what do you think?
Yeah, but I think for me, life's not changed a huge amount. So when I'm not out delivering training and coaching, I'm working in my home office anyway. So I'm used to sort of being on my own and managing my meals. I'm probably trying to eat more healthily than I have been, and I do have a bit more time to organize that. So in that sense, yes. But I'm gradually getting rounder. I'm working on the curves.
Good work. Now, your story that you're going to share with us, and there has to be a true story, but it's a spooky one, isn't it?
It's a little bit spooky. Depends what you think of as spooky, but yeah, it could be considered spooky.
Right. Okay. Let me just check with Caspar. Caspar, do you believe in ghosts and predictions and stuff like that?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure. Do I believe in ghosts? I don't know. Well, I'm a friendly ghost, apparently. So.
Oh, Caspar the friendly ghost. You've got a ghost name, yeah. So my position on ghosts and stuff is that I don't believe in them, but I am a bit scared of them. So that's where I stand. Right. Anyway, there's not actually ghosts in your story. I don't know why I've said that, but it is when you told me this story, Mel, it did make the hairs on the back of my back go a bit funny. So anyway, yeah, tell us your story.
Okay, so a lot of people ask me how I ended up in Scotland. So that's what this story is about. But I think I often wonder whether we make our choices or whether someone plants a seed in our mind and that guides us to make a certain choice, or whether it's all just mapped out for us in a big, master plan for our life, or whether maybe our past life, if we had one, impacts our current life. So my story, I probably need to share two little incidents that happened that will give it some context. And the first one was when I was 5 years old, and I used to have a recurring nightmare.
And so this is back in Australia.
This is back in Australia, yes.
Right,
okay. So I grew up in outer suburbs of Melbourne. So in this dream, I was 5 years old, and I was walking down a dark, dim, misty sort of cobblestone street. I was holding my dad's hand. He was on my right, and to my left was a big, long stone wall. And every so often in the wall, there was these gaps in the wall, and there was like a wrought iron gate or something. And either side of the gaps were these pillars with these little pier caps, I think they're called, on the top of the pillars with this particular carving around the top of the pillars. And in the nightmare, I'd be walking along with my dad, and all of a sudden a black cloaked, black gloved figure would reach out from the wall, the gap in the wall, and pull me in to the wall, and I would open my mouth to start screaming, but no words, no sound came out. So I'm in my nightmare going, ah, and my dad kept walking, and he didn't realize that I'd let go of his hand. And so every night after night after night, I would wake up just terrified, and this, no scream had come out, but obviously once I woke up, I was screaming the place down. So this went on for quite some time, and eventually I can't remember what or why the dreams stopped, but they went away eventually. Fast forward 30 years to when I was 35, and I was planning a trip, a sort of a belated gap year, really, because I didn't take one when I was in my 20s or late teens, and I decided to, right, after a life-changing incident, I decided, right, okay, I'm going to take some time off. And a couple of months prior to that, I went with my mum to see a tarot card reader. I don't know what you think about tarot card readers, but we go for a bit of fun. We don't live our lives by it, but every now and again, we go to see this tarot card reader, and she's predicted some things that have come about. So that's always interesting. Anyway, this woman said that she saw me having two trips in the near future. She said a short one and then a longer trip, and that was exactly right. I was about to go for a long weekend to Adelaide, to the WOMAD big music festival there, and then I was planning my longer trip to leave in a few months' time. And then she said, and I see you spending a lot of time in Scotland. And I said, Scotland? Why would I want to go to Scotland? And no thought about going to Scotland. And
so that's literally the first time Scotland had come into your mind when she said that.
Yes. And after that, I spent a little bit of my time traveling with a friend, and we had decided after that to call into Scotland as part of the travels, and really a couple of days really to check out Edinburgh Castle, go to the Highlands, and to spend 2 days at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. And so that was kind of her idea, her background. She was born in Scotland and lived the first 3 months of her life in Scotland. So she wanted to go to Scotland to find where she had kind of been brought up. So we decided to do that, and that was all fine. Then I went on my trip, and I was anticipating I would be away from 9 to 12 months. I would travel for 4 or 5 months and then work in the UK. I have an ancestry visa, which enables me to work here. And then I would travel back home via Africa. And that was 15 years ago. So I can see you doing the maths going, how old is she? So anyway, I had traveled, done, sort of 5 months traveling. And then I came to the UK, and I didn't know where to live or what I was going to do. I loved London, but didn't want to live in London. And I ended up in a little place called Towcester, which is halfway between Milton Keynes and Northampton.
It's in all the guidebooks, isn't it? The Aussies always say, go to
Towcester.
Edinburgh,
The reason,
and don't forget Towcester. They always say that, don't they?
And actually, I had a pen friend I'd been writing to since I was 11, and she lived in Toaster. And every time I wrote it, I thought the word was Towcester, because that's how it's spelt. So I thought I was going to Towcester. Anyway, I spent some time.
Nobody has even heard of it. Most people here think toaster is some kind of kitchen appliance. They don't even know. I wouldn't have known it's near Milton Keynes, I don't think. Anyway, so you're in Toaster.
Yes, and there's a race course there if you're into horse racing, and it's not far from Silverstone if you're into car racing. Anyway, so I was working in the pub there and trying to decide what to do, applying for jobs all over the place. And I started to think I'd like to go to Edinburgh. I've been here a couple of times because I went once again after the initial visit. I came up for Hogmanay, and I thought, you know what, I really like Edinburgh. I'm thinking about moving there. And then because I have a background as a performer, I thought, right, I'm just going to move to Edinburgh and get myself a job at the Fringe Festival. And so I didn't know when or how, and I'd applied for another job. So I was waiting until I heard about that job, and that might have changed the whole course of my life. And I didn't get that job. And the night that I found out, I also found out from someone who was a local at the pub that I was working in, that he was driving a truck from London to Glasgow the following day. Would I like a lift? He knew I'd been thinking about going to Edinburgh. I said, yep, great. So I packed up everything and said my goodbyes in Toaster. And at 4 o'clock the next day, I got picked up and driven up to Scotland. And he ended up dropping, it was a very long trip. He ended up dropping me in Scotland outside Waverley Station in Edinburgh, 1 a.m. in the morning. And that's when I started my life in Edinburgh.
Interesting point. Waverley Station, only station in the country named after a book.
How do you know that random fact? That's fascinating.
Because when I've arrived at Waverley Station to do the Fringe, it says it's the book by Sir Walter Scott, and there's no other stations named after books, I don't think.
Wow.
They say that, but instantly I remember thinking, surely Paddington was named after it. Was it the other way around? Anyway, I digress. So you've arrived at Waverley.
So I arrived at Waverley, and I had thought, look, I want to get a job. So I'll cut out all the middle bits, but basically I found myself a place to live and got myself a job at the Fringe office. And one night I was coming home from the Fringe office, and I walked home a different way. And as I was walking, it suddenly felt very familiar, and I was just going underneath a bridge, and I looked to my left, and there was a stone wall, exactly the same wall that had been in my nightmares as a kid. And then as I approached, there was a gap in the wall with the pillars either side and the exact same carving on the top of the pillar. And I just went, okay, that's like really familiar. That's from my dream. And it was it was the weirdest thing. So yeah, I kind of took it in, stood for a moment, and went, I just kind of noticed it, and then went, And it didn't feel scary or anything. It was daytime, like afternoon. So I'd finished work and it was afternoon. To be honest, I didn't walk that way in the dark anymore. I didn't take that route home afterwards. But I wonder, as I said before, I don't know if the woman planted the seed that I should go and spend some time in Scotland, or whether, in fact, it's all written in a book for me to live in Scotland, or whether, in fact, I have had a past life in Scotland, and that's why I feel so comfortable in Edinburgh.
The writing was on the wall, literally. There's a couple of things about this that trouble me. One is, if I had found a wall that had scared me all those years ago, I suddenly wouldn't then think, I think I'll live in this city for the next 15 years. This will be lovely. I would literally be on the next plane back to Adelaide, I think.
To be honest, when I moved here, I wasn't thinking I would be here for 15 years.
And the other thing is, don't you think possibly that the woman with the tarot cards, she put the idea of Scotland in your mind, and that's why you came, rather than she saw it in your future?
Could be. Yeah, I don't know what I think about that. But what I think is interesting is that as a child growing up in outer suburbs of Melbourne, where would I have ever seen any architecture like was in my dream that I should then suddenly encounter in Edinburgh?
That's the point. Well, then they don't have walls like that in your... No. What do you think, Caspar? That's a bit scary, isn't it?
That is. That's life coming back, isn't it? And but you seem very happy with it, then, Mel. I mean, you seem pretty resolved with it all. So because you're relaxed, I'm not feeling scared.
Yeah.
Yes, I probably didn't tell the story spookily enough, did I?
Well, when I used to read stories to my nephews, Christopher and Julian, and they're about 30 and 28 now, so quite a long time ago, and I would read them stories and I would do the spooky voices. They would say, "Not too scary, Uncle Jeremy." They wanted just
like
enough.
a 5 out of 10 scary.
Yeah, it's like on kids' DVDs when it says contains mild peril.
I've never seen that.
We've never seen that. It's worth, if we are ever allowed it out into shops again, it's worth just going and look at DVD and it says on the back may contain mild peril.
Mild perils.
That's funny. I always watch well, I don't like watching horror movies or spooky movies, and anytime it's spooky, it's always the music that gets me. So if I put my fingers in my ears, I can watch it, or if I shut my eyes, I can hear it, but I can't see them. I can't watch and listen at the same time, or it's just overwhelmingly too spooky and scary.
What I find scary is when it's a fairly normal film, but just with something just slightly out of the normal. Not so like, do you remember the film The Sixth Sense, when the little boy talked to ghosts and he just went to the toilet in the night and was just standing having a wee, and you just saw something, just a shape walk across the back. Oh. And then I went home on my own back to my flat, and in the night I had to go to the loo, and I just I ran back to the room. Anyway,
I did have had a ghost though. I think when I was working at the Fringe office, there's apparently a ghost there, and I experienced it. So I never believed in ghosts before then.
Crikey. Wouldn't it be scary if suddenly a figure just walked across the back of you now?
No, I didn't have one. I had someone blowing on the back of my neck, but no one was there. That's weird.
To be honest, I've had that in the Fringe office. It's not necessarily a ghost. Anyway, talking of mild peril, let's come to our intrepid round the world sailor. So is your story going to be about sailing, Caspar?
It might involve a little bit of sailing. By the way, I just remembered, actually, I really don't like ghost stories at all. I never watch scary films because I don't like them, because I get scared. So it's so it's got a little bit of a sailing theme. So it's funny, by the way, as you're just talking about Edinburgh, I was backtracking in my mind back into the old world, back as it was. The last time I was in Edinburgh, I did a speaking gig up there last year, and I got the train back from Waverley about midnight. I got the sleeper train back. First time I've been in the sleeper train. It was a lovely experience, waking up at Euston at 7 a.m, having had a sort of very gentle night coming back. So back in the old world anyway.
Yeah. Interesting thing about Waverley, only station named after a book. There we are. This is very good whiskey, by the way, but it just gives me terrible short-term memory. Just before you start, a lot of people will be wondering, I wonder what whiskies Jeremy's drinking tonight, because I have a different one each week. It's Woodford Reserve. Now, I grew up in Woodford, or Woodford Green, just down the road, and no mention of this whiskey at all. So it's one in America. That's mine was in East London. Anyway, save me, Caspar, by telling me about your mild peril on your trip. So where are you on the ship? Is it a ship or a boat?
It's a boat. Yeah, ships are big things. Boats are small things.
So just so I don't ever make that mistake again, how can you tell how big?
I knew you were going to ask me that question. I don't know. It's just big grey things with guns on them. They're definitely ships. And contain someone probably will sort of come in and say exactly what the definition is, but I know the things that I'm sailing are boats. And
no one will. But from my years
while you're talking.
if you ask a question on a local radio phone in, no one ever rings in. So what you have to do is deliberately say something wrong, and then they'll ring in to correct you. So I'm going to say, it's a boat if there's 10 people on it, but more than that, if it's 11, it's a ship. Now people will go, well, actually, Jeremy. Anyway, you're on this boat.
We're on the boat. So basically, as some people will know, in 2014 we set off for 2 years around the world, and lots of people thought we were a little bit nuts to go and do that for all the obvious reasons, taking kids around the world and all those sorts of things.
2 years.
2 years.
Crikey! What was it, a pedalo? Is that the normal length it takes to get around the world?
I wonder how long it would take in a pedalo. Someone's probably gone across an ocean in a pedalo, actually. So,
I remember working with Dame Ellen MacArthur, and I sailed around the Isle of Wight once with her, making a report for her just before she went off on that Vendée Globe when she tried to set the record. But she did it in like a couple of months or something, didn't she?
Yeah, but she didn't have 3 kids with her.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Anyway, yeah. So
And she wasn't stopping either. So it's so yeah, that was non-stop. So
anyway, sorry to keep interrupting. You're on your
no,
pedal.
it's fine.
You're on your pedal.
So basically, for the 2 years, I was just like just permanently switched on the whole time, and I got to the stage where I would be like asleep in the bunk while Nicola, my wife, was sort of on watch and running the boats, and there'd be the slightest change in the wind or something like that, or the seas, and I just wake up straight away. It was completely tuned into everything, and so basically for 2 years, I was just like permanently switched on. Anyway, towards the end of our voyage, we got back to St. Lucia in the Caribbean. My oldest daughter at that point said we've circumnavigated, and she decided to fly home at that point to go to stay with Nicola's parents. And we made the choice, we wanted to sail the boat to San Francisco. So going back across the Caribbean Sea through the Panama Canal, and then all the way up to all the way up to San Francisco. And so we sailed across to Panama. And at that point, my wife and my youngest daughter decided they were going to get off the boats because they'd had enough. And the sailing route from Panama to San Francisco, it's pretty rough. It's probably probably is the toughest sailing passage I've ever done. And I had 3 new crew flew into Panama for that. And so basically for 30 days, we go from Panama to San Francisco. It's my son on board, Columbus, and these 3 friends of mine.
Brilliant name for a son, by the way, of a round the world sailor, Columbus. Genius.
It was typecast, wasn't it? So it's but basically for those 30 days, we're literally just hammering against these huge, great big waves, and it's just brutal. And I'm just literally permanently switched on. Anyway, on the it was in June 2016 that we sailed underneath the Golden Gate Bridge and drew up in the dock in Sausalito. And basically tied up there, went out and had a few drinks as you would. Anyway, the following morning, woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, needed a wee, and decided to get off the boat to go to the facilities on the dock. Anyway, as I go to step off the boat and step onto the pontoon, I just completely missed the pontoon. And from having had 2 years where I'm just literally alert to every single thing, I just go splash into the water. But not only that, the pontoon is there and I fall down and I land on my right hand side here, so it's literally completely bruised all the way up here. But I sort of fall in the water there and I'm a little bit dazed because I'm not really quite sure what's happened to me, because I've got a couple of drinks in me still and just not quite sure what's going on. I know, obviously caused a little bit of a noise, but Columbus comes up on deck and he looks around, doesn't see anything, disappears back downstairs again, just leaves me there in the water. And it's like, it's got you around the world for 2 years and just leaves me floating around. So, it was kind of like just having been that intensely connected, and then just suddenly just all fell apart at the end and, plopped in the water.
Well, I'm so glad that you survived all that. I believe that you've done quite a few sort of media interviews since we've been in this lockdown situation, advising people on... because you were the original Mr. Lockdown with your family, weren't you? And you've been chatting to a few people. Yeah,
no, I've actually been doing a lot of talks actually about how do you sort of manage in self-isolation and do homeschooling and work at the same time. So yes, and lots of that at the moment. So
you must be quite good at homeschooling, because presumably you and Nicola had to homeschool the children when they were on the 2-year trip, did you?
We did. So what was really interesting, so for the first 3 months of that, it was interesting, that first 3 months, before we went away, I was doing 14, 15 hours a day in my business, and then suddenly went from being completely at work to being 24 hours a day on the boat with the kids. And for the first 3 months, I kind of liken it, I was like holding my breath. And I was kind of going a bit crazy because I was kind of trying to control everything, and I was still in my old world way of thinking. And we got to the Canary Islands, and a friend of ours took the kids away for 24 hours and then brought them back. And I was like, take them away again, please. I'm not ready to see them yet. And at that point, I realized, okay, I've got to do some adjusting here. Otherwise, I'm not going to enjoy this. So therefore, it was about relaxing into it and saying to the kids, okay, how are we going to do the schooling, and finding things they were curious and interested in? Because trying to apply old world rules into what was our new world just wasn't working, because reality was fighting us the whole time. I think it's a little bit like that now with lockdown, trying to sort of do things the way we did them and do schooling. I think it needs to be a lot more flexibility than there was before. So.
And of course, the whole thing now, and we all speak at events, or we used to back in the old days. Do you remember the old days when they were allowed out and we used to be able to meet people? Those were the days, weren't they? Now it's all on Zoom, isn't it? And I've seen this. Let me share something with you. I found this on Twitter. This guy, he literally reviews people's backgrounds. So it's called Room Rater. And so this is him reviewing at David Spade's background, and he says, functional room, great plant and table, point off for not turning on the purple lava lamp. And I think that is right, because the blue one's on but the purple one's not. So
I think that's a bit harsh, because I look at that and I'd say, look, my background's a bit plain. I'd say that's at least an 8.
Yeah, so let's just have a look at people's back. So Caspar, I would say you've got a solid 7 out of 10 for being in front of your garage door. That's good.
I thought it was
a green screen over there, but it's just green, isn't it? So
yeah,
boring.
And Mel, you've gone very monochrome in the background, haven't you, with yours?
I have. Yeah.
Almost looks like a black and white print, apart from the green foliage of the plant there, and then you're very red in the foreground. Yeah, so I think I'd give you both very good scores on that. Let me share some other little bits with you, because I just thought I ought to put a bit of content in this week. So this is my favorite picture from the internet for this week, all the superheroes bowing down to the NHS staff.
Yeah, absolutely, they're doing an amazing job, obviously. I mean, it's
fantastic. Yeah, so we'll have the pots and pans on our balconies in our development. Everyone's got a balcony, and we'll come out and bang the pots and pans. And then I've got a vuvuzela, and Jeanette, my wife's got one as well, and we just blow these South African horns. I'm looking for them, but actually, of course, they're out on the balcony ready for tomorrow night. So that's my favorite picture on the internet. And then just a few other things I'd put. This is Jimmy, our dog, with his mask on. Are you guys wearing masks when you go out?
No. Although in Scotland, the latest advice is that if you're in a place where you can't physically distance, then they're recommending that you put something over your face. So if you go to the supermarket, lift your scarf up or whatever. So I was quite interested to hear that, because I didn't think that was a thing, but maybe it is now.
Yeah. Have you got a mask, Caspar, yet, or are you thinking?
No masks. How about you, Jim? Are you masked up?
I'm masked up. Yeah, when I go out, I do wear a mask. Yeah, but
Spider-Man.
No, it's exactly like that one Jimmy's wearing there. It's a blue one with white. We've got a box of 100 of them. This is the lockdown beard I experimented with last week, but I just think it makes me look very old, because there's a lot of silver into that beard. So that's gone. I think that was probably a wise choice.
I did see that one before, Jim. I felt a little bit uncomfortable. You're semi-naked on the screen there. I mean, it's
a bit weird, didn't it?
Okay, let's move on then to this one, much more normal. This popped up in my Facebook timeline. This is from 3 years ago, when I was hosting the Queen's bonfire. Not a bonfire, what was it called, when they lit a beacon for the Queen's birthday, and it's just been her birthday again. This was 3 years ago, and all across the country they lit beacons, and I had my picture taken not knowing that was happening behind me, and it looks like my hair's on fire.
It does, doesn't it? It's
really good picture.
It is really good. And then this popped up from 2006 FA Cup final. West Ham had just lost to Liverpool. My team had just lost. We thought we were going to win something for the first time since the year when I left home to go to university. So 1980 was the last time we won anything, and 2006 we really nearly did, and then right at the end we lost. And it's one of my favorite pictures, because I'm wearing a jester's hat, which would suggest happiness, but I look very, very miserable. And just one last thing I want to share with you: I've signed up for a course on rhetoric at Harvard University.
Thank you.
The art of persuasive writing and public speaking. That's going to be good, isn't it? And so you can see here, it's 8 weeks long, 2 to 3 hours a week. The pace is self-paced, and it's free. But if you want a certificate at the end, you've got to pay $99. So not exactly free, but I probably don't need the certificate.
What have you learned so far, Jim?
Well, it hasn't started yet. It starts in a couple of weeks' time. But I thought, just to try out the system, I'd sign up for another course that I didn't necessarily want to do as much as the rhetoric one. And it was on Shakespeare's life and writing. And actually, it's really good.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. But there's an American guy standing on Millennium Bridge saying, "This is where William Shakespeare." And I thought, oh, okay, mate, I'm from London. And yeah, we did Shakespeare at school. But then it turned out, as it went on, he did know a lot more about Shakespeare than I did, on account of him being a Harvard professor of literature. So yeah, it's a really good thing. Right, well, we're just about out of time, but I'd always like to give my guests a chance to plug themselves, just in case at some point we're allowed out and we get a chance to speak, or if you want to, do those virtual presentations that people do. So Mel, do you want to kick off? How do people get in touch with you if they want to book you as a pitch presentation specialist?
Yes, you can get in touch with me via my website, which is melsherwood.com, and I can help you with confidence, public speaking, presentation skills, pitching, and online presenting as well.
Brilliant. Okay, and Caspar, people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, best way, all the social media channels, but my website, casparcraven.com, and doing lots of talks at the moment on adapting in times of crisis and how do you manage your work team and your home team. So if anyone wants talks around that, got lots of them.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for being my brilliant guests. I've really enjoyed that. Have a great rest of your week. Lovely weekend. I've been Jeremy Nicholas, jeremynicholas.co.uk. If anyone would like to book me to speak. And as you can see, I've got this lovely, we haven't talked about my background. So I just want to talk about my background.
Your background.
Yeah, my background.
And I think, by the way, we ought to rate it afterwards as well.
Rate it afterwards as well.
After you explained that Mel and I should both rate it. So, because that would be fair.
Okay. So, this is just a contemporary painting that I bought at an art auction once, and it's symbolizing people put their hands in each other's pockets. These are not in the painting, by the way. This is a little statuette of Bobby Moore. I just, every job I've ever gone for an interview with, I've taken this little statuette of Bobby Moore with me that I've had by my bedside since I was a kid. And he hasn't always leant over quite as much as that. And then obviously the globe is there mainly just to hold the painting up. But the thing I wanted to ask you is, no one, in a week of having that black and white photo up there, I've mysteriously put a black and white photo up there. No one has asked me who that is. And it's David Bowie and Debbie Harry. Yeah.
Why?
It's just a lovely picture of two people that I greatly admire.
Fabulous.
Well, there we are. Right, so points out of 10 for my background.
Ladies first, what do you think, Mel?
I think, okay, so it's relatively color coordinated. There seems to be going with the blues theme, and you have some interesting things, but not interestingly enough that they're taking away from you. So I think probably.
Meaning this guy.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mention who he's Wenlock, and he's obviously the London 2012 mascot, named after the village of Much Wenlock in Shropshire, where they had a sort of precursor to the Olympics.
Fab. So in terms of scoring, rating out of 10, I'd probably give it an 8.
Oh, very, very kind. Thank you. And Caspar, how many would you give me?
Yeah, so I'm thinking that guy earlier, he was pretty harsh with his thing. I can see you put some effort into that, but you've left your key in there, haven't you? I'm looking down there on the left-hand side and your cabinets. So, that's kind of like the lava lamp being left on. But I like the painting, and I like the Union Jack, the Wenlock, and I think I'm an 8 as well, actually.
Well, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. I appreciate your comments. So have a lovely time, and hopefully that you'll get booked and we'll get out of this at some point. I've been Jeremy Nicholas. This has been the After Dinner Show. Thank you very much. Good night.
Take care.
Thanks.